Allora, buongiorno e benvenuti a questa sessione che è stata benissimo introdotta
That was perfectly introduced by the video. The topic of the session, you know, is the financial system between new technologies and global rules. Some say that finance is the only thing for which globalization still exists. We will delve deeper into this topic. In the meantime, I would like to thank all the participants, and I am going to introduce them as I give them the floor. I will start from Arzu Akışura, partner of the tax and law practice at BeOne, Türkiye. She is our distinguished guest, the only woman in the panel, so I give her the floor first. She is going to talk about tax, her field of expertise. How is the fiscal system changing in this new technological era and faced with these fast changes? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank the sponsors of the 18th Verona Eurasia Forum. Welcome, everyone. So we are going through a period where routines are being disrupted in many areas, where ways of doing business and even jobs are changing. It's of course inconceivable that this situation would not have an impact on taxes, tax systems and tax policies, which are among the most important building blocks. When we quickly look at the world economy, according to the IMF's World Economic Outlook report estimates for October 2025, the global economy is expected to grow by 2.3% in 2025 and 2.1% in 2026, following 3.3% growth in 2024. Climate change-related risks are becoming an increasingly significant source of vulnerability for the global economy. This is causing supply-side shocks, particularly in the agriculture and energy sectors. We see that the Turkish economy maintains its resilience in 2024 and completes the year with 3.3% growth. Within the scope of the medium-term program, the growth rate is estimated to be 3.3% in 2025 and 3.8% in 2026. The structure of a country's tax legislation and policy is also a determining factor for the country's economic performance. In this context, I would like to mention the International Tax Competitiveness Index 2025 study conducted by the Tax Foundation Center for Global Tax Policy. This index evaluates a country's tax system in terms of competitiveness and neutrality, two important elements of tax policy. A competitive tax legislation means low tax rates, because this repels foreign investors and just discourages local investors as well. According to the OECD research, corporate taxes are the most detrimental to economic growth, while income taxes and consumption taxes are less detrimental. What is meant by tax neutrality is that consumption or savings are not prioritized over each other, and no distinction is made between taxes on investment or wealth. The index takes into account issues such as corporate tax, income tax, consumption taxes, property taxes, and taxation of foreign earnings. Estonia has been ranked first as the country with the best tax code in the OECD for 12 consecutive years. Latvia comes in second, New Zealand in third, and Switzerland in fourth. Turkey ranks 12th in this ranking, following Sweden. It ranks ahead of Canada, the Netherlands, the US, Germany, Korea, Japan, the UK, Belgium, Italy and France. It's also worth noting that Turkey maintained its ranking from the previous year with 38 countries included on the list. As of today, I would like to address the question of where tax policy reforms are concentrated and how they are developing and evolving by referring to the OECD Tax Policy Reforms 2025 study. While 2023 marked a turning point away from the broad tax relief measures seen during the pandemic and the subsequent period of inflation, this period was reinforced in 2024 with rate increases and targeted tax support across all major tax types. Tax incentives continue to be offered, particularly for investments in R&D, clean technologies and strategic sectors. The use of tax policy to support the transition to a low-carbon economy continued to expand. Countries combined carbon pricing with reduced VAT rates for goods and services linked to environmental sustainability and corporate tax incentives for clean investments. If we look at Türkiye, general corporate tax rate applied since 2023 is 25%. As of December 2024, the dividend withholding tax has been increased from 10% to 15%. VAT rates applied as 1 to 8% and the general rate of 18% were changed to 1 to 10 and 20% as of July 2023. The progressive income tax application continues and a 40% rate has been added to the 15, 20, 27, 35 rates as of 2021. Turkey has adopted transfer pricing legislation broadly aligned with the OECD Transfer Pricing Implementation Guide. Türkiye is a leader in the digital economy, especially in terms of the number of users. It's a very important market from the perspective of digital economy. In this respect, serious steps have been taken regarding taxation of the digital economy. Special VAT liability was introduced in 2018. Taxation of advertising service revenues on the internet was introduced in 2019. Türkiye, as a member country of the OECD Inclusive Framework G20, is a signatory of the OECD BEPS, Base Erosion and Profit Shifting Action Plan. There are undoubtedly many reasons why more than 140 countries have agreed to this action plan. However, perhaps the most important are the taxation of the digital economy, aggressive tax planning, and the abuse of tax treaties. Countries' tax legislation and even double taxation agreements were inadequate in taxing the digital economy. Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, which I think everyone has heard of more or less, are new concepts that have entered our lives within the scope of Action Number 1. Evaluating the tax complications created by the digital economy and preventing harmful tax practices. Pillar 2 sets out the payment of a global minimum tax of 15% for all multinational companies with annual consolidated revenues of over 750 million euros. In September this year, the medium-term program covering the years 26 to 28 was published. The medium-term program aims to maintain fiscal discipline, reduce inflation to single digits in the medium term, and achieve price stability. In May this year, Turkey's investment incentive system was revised, while a project-based incentive system is still continuing. Before concluding, I would like to briefly address the question of where tax policies are headed and what lies ahead. There are four key concepts that stand out. Transparency is first. We can understand this from the reports and reporting obligations prepared by companies. Digitalization. As the digital economy develops its own tax principles, the digitalization of fiscal administrations has also brought about the use of AI and collaboration between administrations, sustainability and international tax reforms. The OECD's BEPS action plan is a good example to this. Remote work taxation principles introduced during the pandemic, and the encouragement of genuine restructuring in overseas investments. Thank you for listening and with due respect. Thank you.
Grazie mille.
Thank you very much. Also, thank you for sticking to the time allotted to you. Of course, fiscal policy is one of the key issues. The other need is that of social justice. Fiscal policies are essential to improve equality and reduce inequality rates. That's the point I would like to start from for the next question to Mikhail Alekseyev, President and Chairman of the Management Board of Pochta Bank. The Gospel contains an episode that always struck a chord with me. At one point, Jesus Christ praises a dishonest administrator because when he's put under pressure by his boss, he calls people with debts and he cancels their debt. This is in the Gospel. So Jesus is talking about a dishonest person, and yet he praises the fact that he cancels their debt. Let's start from this question. Debt is a burden on the world finance. So this is the first issue. And then here's my question. AI is another big issue that weighs on global finance. Can you tell us your view on this? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, the debt issue is a very important problem for the world finance. And if we look at private debt and state debt and the international debt, and different estimates are that it is over $300 trillion US. And if you compare it with GDP, then it is 3 times as the world global GDP. I'm not going to evaluate or assess this fact because debt is a locomotive of economic development, and it is extremely important to understand how this debt is localized geographically in different regions. On average, if we look at state debt at the world level, it is at the level less than 100% of GDP, but there's a great diversity among different countries. In Sudan, for example, it is 222% of GDP, and in Japan, 230%. Sudan is a small country, and maybe it is a local, national problem. But if we look at the United States, there we see that their national debt has grown immensely within the past 20, 30 years, and it is over 34 a trillion, and it is over 100% of their GDP. And if it goes on, then in 15-20 years, the ratio might be similar to Greece. It is approximately 150% of GDP. This is a serious factor because the United States is a very significant country in terms of its size, and of course it affects the world finance system enormously. Those sanctions that were imposed against various countries, including Russia, using various restrictions for settlements in US dollars, they do not promote respect for a dollar as a reserve currency, and they also exacerbate lending and the reduction of debt in comparison with GDP. At the same time, in the emerging economies, the debt is much lower, and on average it is about 60% of their GDP, and in Russia it is 23% only. So this is a and also there's moderate debt in China and India, and there are very good prospects in this respect. So the situation is very much diverse across different regions, and we need to monitor the situation. I'm not saying that in the next year or 2 or 3 we are going to face serious debt problems, but in the mid-term perspective, we need to observe all this very carefully and monitor the current trends. Referring to the second part of your question, modern technology and AI-related technology. Yes, there's great interest because everything is interconnected and intertwined in the world, including debt and economic growth and securities market growth. And what we are facing now, we are moving on to the 6th industrial order, when information technology is changed by biotechnology, nanotechnology, AI, and this is a very important factor that will be defining the future not only of global finance but the global economy generally. I can give a number of examples, a number of facts that will help us understand how deep we are in this technological order and transformation. 35% of the people on the planet on a daily basis are using artificial intelligence. This is enormous. 83% of executives of companies consider AI a strategically important area of business development. Then spendings on data centers. All these costs are similar to a creation of office spaces globally. And what we consume as information content on the internet, largely this is generated by AI. So AI has generated more texts than those texts that were written by people. So these are the changes that took place in the past couple of years. 5 years ago, nobody knew about OpenAI company, but now its capitalization is the largest, $500 billion US. And it is the largest in the world, and they are going to have an IPO for $1 trillion US. Then NVIDIA company, they produce hardware and processors. Their capitalization again is the highest in the world, $5 trillion US. All this has a great impact on the world market, and we see in the recent times the securities market has been growing rapidly, and the question is whether this fast development of IT companies related to AI and data centers creation and so on, isn't it in a way a bubble similar to what we observed at the beginning of the century? I'm speaking about the dot-com bubble. And there's several question marks. According to some estimates, the market of AI and the profits of this segment will be five-fold from $400 billion to almost $2 trillion. It is 36%, the average annual growth rate. But whether there will be a return on investment ensured, there's a serious question mark for that, because electricity consumption is growing and it will affect the economic development related to this technology. And also, we don't know what will be the effect on the natural environment and what will be the practical outcomes of these technologies. Because right now, we see that the profitability of those companies who have been introducing all these technologies has not been seriously affected. And if we look at the dot-com crisis, since then, these technologies, they are intertwined with all the sectors, and the growth of GDP related to AI introduction in the world, again, there are different estimates that they vary from 5% to 5 trillion to 10 or even 15 trillion. So then it is a positive result. But what if investments into these technologies won't be returned so quickly, and maybe we shouldn't be over-optimistic about it? So what we are facing now, we are witnessing very fast and growing transformations in the world and finance as well. And there's a phrase, the world will never be the same. I believe in just several years, 3 or 5, we might say this again, because probably the world will have been even more transformed. But of course, the level of uncertainty is very high, and it is hard to predict anything. We cannot ensure anything, but we need to be ready to any scenarios of development. I do not touch the global finance and geopolitics, how this is interrelated. I did it on purpose, but we all understand that there's always an impact. And if something happens in one region of the world, then it might have an influence on other regions as well. There are risk factors that we all need to monitor closely. So in conclusion, I can say that we live in a very interesting period of time when there are so significant changes in all areas. And I wouldn't relate these changes to a single factor, for example, a technology, because this is a comprehensive transformation that covers all areas of our life. Thank you.
Thank you. Many interesting things in what you've just said. This unknown, for those who work in finance, forecasting what is going to happen is essential. It is also equally important to be ready for change. Now, I would like to give the floor to Loretta Napoleoni, a journalist, writer. By the way, she also wrote a book that was released in May in Italy on techno-capitalism. The English version was also published, The Rise of New Oligarchs and the Fight for the Common Goods. 2 chapters of your book focus on cryptocurrency. Here's another issue that weighs on the future of world finance. So this is what I would like you to talk about. Thank you. Thank you. In these 2 days, we heard speakers talk about some very important concepts and use some keywords such as partnership, multipolarity, sustainability,
polygamy.
and even political polygamy.
Some speakers have even remembered the attempts of Russia after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the implosion of the Soviet Union to merge the European and the Asian continent, which geographically have always been united, but they have been kept apart by political will. Now, all of this, these words and this concept 20, 30 years ago would have been hardly been mentioned, and the reason why this is so new is because we are today witnessing a major change in history. We are at a critical junction. A major shift is taking place. So the old equilibria that we have known for the last century, since the end of World War II, are being dismantled, and everything has been redrawn. Nothing seems immune to the political change, to this wind of change, including fiat currencies. So one of the reasons why all of this is happening is because of technology. So I will focus on that. So my view is that within the next decades, fiat currencies will disappear. This is a unique phenomenon in history. It's never happened before. So currencies have been used for long periods of time. Certain kind of currencies have been considered the sort of reserve currencies. The Roman sestertius, for example. The value of these currencies was linked to the value of the metal, which was contained, which could be silver or gold, and the value of the seigniorage. The seigniorage was the cost that the political power, which was the superpower at the moment, had to pay in order to mint that coin. So the wide use and popularity of these currencies lasted as long as the political power of the superpower lasted. So there was a sort of interdependency between the two. I'll give you an example. The British pound was widely used. At a certain point, it accounted for 59% of the world transactions. Today, it's down at 2%. The supremacy of the dollar, what we have known in the last century, was very much related to the role of the United States as the superpower. In 2024, 60% of world transactions were actually cleared in US dollar, and the same goes for the reserves. But as empires fall, currencies fall, and they follow exactly the same pattern. So what is changing today? So in the era of digitalization of currencies, in particular, we're talking about the Bitcoin, it seems that this relationship is breaking down. The Bitcoin is not a currency which is held by political power. It's not a currency that is produced by political power. It does not have a central bank. It is produced by software. And its production is controlled by a mathematical formula which changes according to the frequency and the speed of the extraction of the blocks, which contain the bitcoins, from the software. But that's not enough. A ledger, a digital ledger, which is called the blockchain, records every single extraction and transaction, making impossible to change any of these values. So the Bitcoin has a life of its own. Some people, actually called it, the currency of the people. But anyway, so why this is important? Well, it is important because we were talking a lot about BRICS country producing their own currency, which would be, similar maybe to the euro in their trading area in order to challenge the supremacy of the dollar. Well, I don't think this is going to happen. If it happens, it's going to be pointless because, the real key here is to find a way to digitalize exchanges. Also, to buy and sell through a digital currency. And in this relationship, the BRICS have just produced, and they're experimenting on a system which is called the BRIC Pay. This is a system that facilitates cross-border transaction between the members using national currencies. So you don't have to go across the US dollar anymore. You don't have to exchange into dollars in order to have a benchmark. The benchmark is actually produced by the blockchain. So it's, how does it work? It's a sort of financial messaging system that does not have a single cryptocurrency, but can exchange digitally currencies of the different countries using the system of exchange of the various countries. So for India, we use the UPI, for example. For China, we use the Alipay. Now, that is all regulated by a digital wallet, similar to the wallet that is used by the Bitcoin. So, unfortunately, my 7 minutes are finished, but what I want to conclude is the future is here, and an organization like the BRICS, which is more flexible than the old-style organization created by the Bretton Woods agreements, is better equipped to face this future and to profit from such future.
Extremely interesting. Thank you very much to Loretta. It would be the first cyber currency that is apolitical and non-statal. Now, I would like to give the floor for a pleasant conclusion to Sergey Belyakov, President of the National Association of Non-State Pension Funds in Russia. And here's my question for you. Can you talk about the huge topic that worries us so deeply? The relations between states today seems to be characterized by the principle of omni homini lupus. All states are against each other, and so it almost seems as if international politics, we heard it from President Prodi before, is not able to step in with its organization and institutions when these events happen. And yet, finance is there. How is finance experiences this situation? Sometimes we have the feeling that finance is at the front line in the war between states. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Alessandro, and I would like to thank the organizers and specifically Professor Tŷrkiye for the ability to be present here, to speak, to talk to one another. I think this is particularly valuable today. I'd like to start with the following, answering your question on how the finance area is doing today. I guess we need to add a bit of spice to a very smooth dialogue of our session. Different words were used to say that this world will never be the same, that the technologies that evolve so rapidly create not only opportunities but also pose challenges, because we do not know what is the lifetime for these technologies, how sustainable the companies are who generate those technologies, what is going to happen to the demand, is there a risk that technologies of tomorrow will zero out the technologies of the present, and what is it that we can trust, where we can invest our money, and what is going to define this rapidly changing and confusing world. And as strange as it may sound, all the things I've just mentioned give us a feeling of an upcoming chaos or nightmare that is so difficult to navigate, and frankly we do not have time to navigate it. However, if we are to look back at the human history, we would see that all along we would inevitably be facing a slogan, this world will never ever be the same again. Think of the invention of the printing machine, of water supply systems, internal combustion engine, and this has been changing so fast. The world was changing, but it turned out that we are extremely adaptable. And it's not that this world will never ever be the same again. It's just the natural course of evolution. We may assume where we start and where we're heading to, whether we will make it from point A to point B. It doesn't really matter, because eventually finance and financial experts tend to be very rational. Financial experts invest into something they believe in and where they can see a clear impact. And the amount of investment capital and the amount of financial resources generated by the global economy allow us to comfortably undertake risks and mitigate those and hedge them versus potential failures or bubbles. On the one hand, we see that access to finance in any company, be that a large company or a startup or any kind of visionaire raising financing through development of the fund market and the stock market, has become increasingly simplified in all parts of the global economy, not just in North America, but also in Asia, in Europe, and among others, not just Western Europe, but also Eastern Europe and Russia. All global economies and countries are simplifying access to finance, and all of that can easily and comfortably survive global crises. For example, the crisis that started as a mortgage crisis eventually became a world financial crisis of 2007-2008, all the way to some local crises when startups simply do not disclose enough information, raise a lot of funding, and then it turns out that investors end up with nothing. However, other assets that they invest into by analyzing thoroughly offset those failures. And all in all, this is a system of checks and balances that allows investors to navigate in this system of potential losses and gains. And I guess just the way we've been able to overcome all the previous hurdles of the previous centuries, just in the same manner we'll be able to overcome the challenges of today. The other thing is more serious. Everything that is happening to the global economy and geopolitics, when it's not the economy that dictates the behavior and trends, but the politicians. And we see that some politicians are not acting in favor of their national economic interests or in the interest of their societies, but do exactly the opposite. Well, this is a reality that we need to count with. Economy is science, and resources that economy and all other countries on the globe, large and small, have are scale, but nonetheless they are not endless, they are not infinite. And those anchors of economic stability and the need to have economic predictability could assist us in this difficult economic environment and could help us move in the right direction. And I believe that very soon we will be able to see the situation where it's the opposite, where when the cannons are loud and the laws are keeping quiet. I hope that laws and legislation will come into play to force the cannons to stop. We need to follow the rules of economy and rules set by the governments for their respective economies and market players. Now, a few words on the pension assets. I have a brief presentation, but since the time is limited, I would like to show you just one slide so that you understand what I'd like to say. Pension funds in the whole world are in possession of large capitals that they invest in certain assets. Most probably those are conservative securities, and this is a source of long-term investment. Have a look at this dotted line. Those are 7 OECD countries, and in total they account for 89% of all pension assets in the world. And please note that the United States, where pension funds have almost $50 trillion under their management. This is colossal resource, and the system of non-pension funds, non-state pension funds in Russia have a fairly long history by Russian standards, about 30 years, but clearly it's not that long as in other countries. The Russian industry is developing, and the fact that we are lagging behind, we only have 9 trillion rubles, which is about 120 billion in US dollar equivalent, and only 4.2% of GDP. This is an important indicator. By the way, to compare Russia with Tŷrkiye, you would see the numbers are similar, 2.8 for Tüürkiye, and Italy being the 8th country of OECD. It's more than 10% of GDP, which is a good indicator. However, the way I read this slide is not a demonstration of failure of non-state fund systems, pension systems in Russia, but rather as a promise of a good future, a big potential, a horizon to reach. We need to increase the coverage of population involved in non-state pension funds, just like in all of the OECD countries. It is either a mandatory or quasi-mandatory element. And we also need to develop the stock market through raising capitalization and the number of issues, because the structure of the stock market in Russia is very far from what happens in Europe and USA. There is a very high presence of commodity sector. We need to increase the amount of issuers to delete the concentration. So the opportunities are bright. The non-state pension funds have proven their efficiency all around the world, so we will be able to overcome all those challenges. We need to show goodwill to do so.
Very well. I'm glad that we're closing on a very positive, optimistic note, and I will go back to the concept of common good that was in the title of this panel, which is now reached its close. Now, the following session will deal with digital technologies, but I would really go back to what Pope Leo XVI said, let us put our swords away. This way probably also finance will improve. Thank you very much, and now we leave the floor to the next session.